At my daughter's wedding, her groom pushed my face into the cake, mockingly exclaiming, "Try the dessert!" Anger boiled up as the icing dripped down my chin. I immediately thought of my diabetes. Then one of the guests pointed at me and exclaimed, "He's a billionaire!" The groom's smug smile disappeared. His face turned pale. He had made a mistake, and now he would pay for it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Of course, we understand your financial limitations, Eldon Whitaker said, cutting through my sentence about wedding venues like a blade through paper. The crystal chandelier above our table seemed to dim. Conversations at nearby tables continued, but ours fell into that particular silence that follows a social execution. Priscilla's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Urban smirked behind his wineglass. Megan's face flushed crimson. I had been explaining how beautiful outdoor ceremonies could be, mentioning a park pavilion I'd seen. Simple. Elegant. Apparently too simple for the Whitakers. "Dad makes things work with what we have," Megan said quickly, her voice pitched higher than usual. "He's always been resourceful." Resourceful? Eldon tasted the word like expensive wine. "That's one way to put it." The waiter approached with practiced invisibility, refilling water glasses. I watched the crystal catch light, wondering how much this dinner cost per minute. The menu had no prices, never a good sign. When ordering, I'd chosen the salmon, while everyone else selected aged steaks. That probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. "Don't worry about the wedding expenses," Priscilla said, her smile sharp as her diamond earrings. "We completely understand your situation." My situation? As if poverty were a medical condition requiring sympathy. Urban leaned back, expensive fabric stretching across his chest. "We've got connections with the best venues in the Hamptons. The Grand Pavilion, specifically. You probably haven't heard of it." "I haven't," I admitted. 50,000 minimum just for the space. He said it casually, watching my reaction. "But don't worry about contributing, Theodore. We've got this covered." The gift box in my jacket pocket felt heavier. Inside was a vintage locket I'd found at an estate sale. Genuine Victorian silver, with space for 2 photos. Beautiful, meaningful, and exactly $37. Suddenly it felt like pocket change at a luxury car dealership. Megan touched my arm. "Dad, you don't have to." "I always provide for my family," I said quietly. Eldon's laugh was dry. "Of course you do. In your own way." The dessert course arrived on plates that could feed a small village. Gold leaf decorated chocolate constructions that looked more like art installations than food. I thought about my kitchen table at home, scarred wood where Megan had done homework for 12 years, where we'd celebrated her college acceptance with grocery store cake. "We're planning quite the bachelor party," Urban announced. "Private yacht, obviously. You're welcome to join if you can get the time off work." Time off work. I hadn't needed to request time off in 15 years. Priscilla dabbed her lips with a napkin worth more than my shirt. "Theodore, what is it you do again?" "Investment consulting." "True enough, if incomplete." "How lovely. Small accounts, I imagine." The check arrived in a leather folder. Eldon didn't even glance at the total before sliding his black card inside. The waiter's grateful nod suggested a tip larger than my monthly grocery budget. Outside, valet attendants brought cars around. The Whitakers' Mercedes gleamed under streetlights like a predator. My Toyota Camry looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. "See you soon," Eldon called through his open window. "We'll handle the real planning." I helped Megan into the passenger seat, her silence stretching between us like a bridge I wasn't sure either of us could cross. The highway stretched ahead, illuminated by passing headlights that swept across our faces in regular intervals. Megan fidgeted with her purse strap, the leather making small squeaking sounds in the quiet car. "The restaurant was beautiful," she said finally. "Those chandeliers must have cost a fortune." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Exit signs flashed past. We'd be home in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to decide whether to let this evening's humiliation stand unchallenged. "Megan," my voice came out rougher than intended. "We need to talk about Urban." Her posture shifted. "What about him?" "The way he spoke tonight. His family's attitude toward..." "Toward what? Toward you?" She turned in her seat. "Dad, they're used to having money. They don't mean anything by it." A truck passed us, its headlights briefly flooding the interior. In that moment, I saw my daughter clearly, defending someone who'd let his father insult me repeatedly, someone who'd smiled while it happened. Character doesn't change with bank account size, I said. Tonight showed me who they really are. You barely know them. I know enough. I've seen how Urban treats service workers, how he talks about people he considers beneath him. Tonight, that included me. Megan's laugh was sharp. You're being paranoid, and frankly, a little controlling. The word hit harder than Eldon's condescension. Controlling, as if wanting better for my daughter meant restricting her freedom. I'm not trying to control you, I said carefully. I'm trying to protect you from making a mistake that will cost you decades of unhappiness. A mistake? Her voice rose. My engagement is a mistake? Your engagement to him might be. Stop the car. What? I said stop the car. Right now. I glanced at her face, illuminated by dashboard lights. Fury and hurt warred in her expression. This wasn't the conversation I'd planned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Megan, let's just... Pull over, Dad. Now. I signaled and eased onto the shoulder. Before the car fully stopped, she was unbuckling her seatbelt. You don't understand anything, she said, grabbing her purse. You don't understand Urban, you don't understand his family, and you definitely don't understand what I need. Sweetheart, please. What I need is support from my father, not judgment. What I need is someone who trusts me to make my own decisions. She opened the door. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the smell of exhaust and distant rain. Where are you going? Anywhere but here. She stepped out, then leaned down to look at me. I'll call Urban to pick me up. At least he doesn't think I'm too stupid to choose my own life. The door slammed. I watched her walk toward a gas station, her heels clicking on asphalt. My phone buzzed. Already texting him, probably. Already choosing him over me. I sat there until she was inside the fluorescent-lit convenience store, until I was sure she was safe. Then I pulled back onto the highway, alone with the radio playing softly and the weight of what I'd just lost. The empty passenger seat seemed to echo with her absence. As I turned into my driveway in Hoboken, the modest two-story house looked smaller than usual. The porch light cast familiar shadows across the garden, where Megan had helped me plant tomatoes every spring since she was 8. A week ago, everything had been different. A week ago, I'd been sitting at this same kitchen table, morning coffee steaming beside the financial section of the Times. April 22nd had started like any other Tuesday, quiet, predictable, content. The house smelled of French roast and the faint lavender soap Megan preferred when she visited. My phone had rung at exactly 8:47 a.m. Dad! Her voice had bubbled through the speaker. I have news! I'd set down my coffee, smiling at her excitement. Good news, I hope. The best news. Urban proposed. The joy in her voice had been infectious. Whatever reservations I'd harbored about her boyfriend dissolved temporarily in the face of her happiness. She deserved love, deserved someone who cherished her. Tell me everything, I'd said, settling back in my chair. It was perfect, Dad. He took me to Central Park, to that spot overlooking the reservoir where we had our first date. Got down on one knee right there on the path, with joggers and dog walkers as witnesses. The ring is gorgeous, a princess-cut diamond that catches light like crazy. I'd pictured it, my daughter's face glowing with happiness, surrounded by strangers who'd probably applauded. The image warmed me despite my concerns about Urban's character. I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. There's going to be an engagement dinner next week. You'll get to meet his parents properly. They're wonderful people, Dad. His father built their business from nothing. He'll probably have lots to talk about with you. That's when I'd made the decision that led to tonight's disaster. Megan, before we meet them, I need to ask you something, a favor. Anything. I'd stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked my neighbor's ordinary lawn. I'd like to keep my financial situation private. Let them think I'm just a regular working person. Silence had stretched between us. When she spoke again, confusion colored her voice. Why would you want to do that? Because I want to know who they really are. Money changes how people treat you, how they see you. If they think I'm wealthy, they'll put on a performance. If they think I'm ordinary, they'll treat you badly. They'll treat me honestly, and if that treatment is bad, then we'll know exactly who we're dealing with. She'd been quiet for a long moment. Dad, that's... That's a little manipulative, isn't it? It's practical. Real character shows when people think there's nothing to gain from kindness. Now, sitting in my current driveway with the confrontation fresh in my memory, I wondered if I'd been right or simply stubborn. My modest home sat quietly around me. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, nothing remarkable. The portfolio statements in my desk drawer told a different story, but those numbers had never mattered much to me. Inside, family photos lined the hallway. Megan at her college graduation. Megan at Christmas morning, surrounded by sensibly priced gifts. Megan laughing at some joke I'd made, her face bright with uncomplicated love. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. Tomorrow would bring the first day of what I feared might be a long silence between us. I'd asked her to hide my wealth, and in return, I'd lost the only thing that truly mattered. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to protect her from people who valued money over character, I'd driven her directly into their arms. As I looked around my unchanged home, the familiar simplicity felt different somehow. Heavier. Every modest piece of furniture, every carefully chosen economy, reminded me of choices I'd made long ago. Before Megan, before the money that changed everything except how I chose to live. The living room hadn't changed in 15 years. Same comfortable couch, same wooden coffee table with its careful ring stains from countless evenings reading together. The only expensive items were hidden, the investment statements locked in my desk drawer, the emergency fund that could buy this entire neighborhood. I settled into my reading chair, the one Megan had helped me pick out at a second-hand store when she was 16. "Dad, this one's perfect," she'd said, running her hands along the worn leather. "It looks like it has stories to tell." Stories, like the one I'd never told her about 1995. 28 years old, living in a studio apartment in San Francisco that barely qualified as housing. The Murphy bed folded down to cover half the floor space. My kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge that hummed like a dying animal. Every morning I'd walk 12 blocks to the accounting firm rather than spend $2 on the bus. My savings account held exactly $5,127. I knew because I checked the balance obsessively, the way some people check their pulse. 5,000 represented 2 years of living like a monk, eating nothing but pasta and canned vegetables, wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. I was walking back from lunch, a bagel from the day-old bin, when 2 young men approached me outside the coffee shop, where I sometimes allowed myself one small cup. "Excuse me," the taller one said, "are you an accountant?" They looked barely old enough to vote. The shorter one clutched a worn laptop like a life preserver. Both wore excitement like expensive cologne, impossible to ignore. "I work in accounting," I admitted carefully. "We need someone to look at our numbers," the tall one continued. "Someone smart, someone who understands money." They explained their idea over terrible coffee in my building's lobby, a software platform that would revolutionize how people shared information. The internet was still young then, dial-up connections and basic websites. Their vision seemed impossible and inevitable simultaneously. "We need initial investment," the short one said, his hands shaking slightly. "Nothing huge. 5,000 would let us rent office space, buy better equipment, maybe eat something other than ramen for a few months. 5,000. My entire safety net. I should have said no. Should have explained that losing 5,000 would mean moving back to my parents' basement in Ohio, admitting defeat. Instead, I found myself asking questions. What was their market research? Revenue projections, competition analysis? They had answers. Good ones. More importantly, they had something I recognized from my own mirror. Hunger. Not for luxury, but for the chance to build something meaningful. "If I invest," I said slowly, "I want 10% equity." "Deal." No hesitation, no lawyer, just a handshake in a lobbying that smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. 6 months later, their first major client signed. 18 months after that, a tech giant acquired them for $42 million. My 5,000 became 4.2 million overnight. I sat in my unchanged living room, remembering that moment. The phone call that changed everything. The realization that money was just a tool, not a destination. I'd seen what wealth did to people, watched the lottery winners and inheritance recipients in my accounting practice. watched money reveal character rather than create it. That's why I kept living simply. Why I raised Megan to value work over wealth, character over capital. Why I'd asked her to hide my financial situation from the Whitakers. The photograph on my end table showed Megan at her college graduation, beaming beside me in front of a modest restaurant where we'd celebrated. She had no idea her education was paid for by tech stock dividends. No idea her father could have bought her anything she wanted. Tomorrow, I realized, I'd need to decide whether that philosophy was worth losing my daughter forever. Morning light didn't make the situation clearer. I woke up hoping last night had been a nightmare, that my daughter hadn't chosen Urban over me in a gas station parking lot. But my phone showed no missed calls, no apologetic texts, no signs that the world had reset while I slept. Day one felt manageable. Megan needed space to process. I maintained my routines: coffee at 6:30, newspaper by 7, checking market reports by 8. Each time my phone buzzed, hope spiked. Usually just emails about investment portfolios that seemed increasingly meaningless. By day 3, I started leaving careful voicemails. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Dad. Just wanted to say I love you. Call when you're ready." Short, respectful, not pushy. Day 7 brought longer messages. "Megan, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe I could have expressed my concerns differently. You know I want you to be happy, right? That's all I've ever wanted." Week 2, I discovered gardening. Megan had always loved my vegetable patch. We'd planted tomatoes together every spring since she was 8. Now I worked the soil alone, pulling weeds that seemed to multiply overnight. Physical labor helped quiet the constant urge to call her. The tomato seedlings I'd bought weeks ago sat in their plastic containers, waiting, too late to plant them now without her. The tradition felt incomplete, like trying to clap with one hand. Week 3 brought desperation disguised as productivity. I organized 20 years of photographs, finding hundreds of Megan at every age. Birthday parties, school plays, graduation day. In every picture, she looked at me with complete trust. When had that changed? My voicemails grew longer, more emotional. "I keep thinking about when you were 12 and broke Mrs. Peterson's window with that baseball. You were so scared to tell me, but when you did, we went together to apologize and pay for repairs. Remember what I told you? That mistakes don't define us. How we handle them does. I think I made a mistake with Urban. Can we figure out how to handle it together?" The wedding invitation never came. Day 25, I drove past Megan's apartment building. Not stopping, not stalking, just confirming she existed. Her car sat in its usual spot, confirming nothing except geography. Day 28 brought panic. Wedding shops, caterers, photographers, everything required final decisions. Was I excluded completely? Would I watch my only child marry someone I didn't trust without being present for the moment? "Megan, it's Dad again. I know I've called a lot this week. Tomorrow is June 1st. I assume that's still your wedding day. I understand if you don't want me there, but I need to know. Please, just tell me if you're okay." My voice cracked on that last message. 30 days of silence had worn down my composure like water on stone. Day 30, I prepared dinner for one. Simple pasta, the kind Megan and I used to make together on Sunday nights. The table felt enormous with only one place setting. The empty chair across from me a constant reminder of what I'd lost through stubborn principle. 6:45 p.m. Tomorrow, somewhere in the Hamptons, my daughter would marry Urban Whitaker. I'd probably watch it happen through social media posts, assuming anyone bothered to include me in their feeds anymore. I sat down to eat, twirling pasta around my fork without appetite. Outside, spring was surrendering to summer. Life moved forward whether I participated or not. The phone rang. My fork clattered against the plate. After 30 days of silence, unexpected calls meant bad news. Emergency rooms, accidents, worst-case scenarios that haunted every parent's imagination. Megan glowed on the screen. My hands trembled as I swiped to answer. "Hello? Dad?" Her voice was smaller than I remembered, nervous. "Hi. Hi?" I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. "Are you okay? Is everything—" "I'm fine. I'm calling because tomorrow is—" She paused. I could hear traffic in the background, Urban's voice saying something indistinct. "The wedding is tomorrow." "I know." The words came out rough, I cleared my throat. I wasn't sure if... I want you there. Relief hit like a physical blow. I leaned against the dining room wall, suddenly dizzy. Thank you, I was hoping. But there are conditions. Of course there were. Nothing came easy anymore. I'm listening. You can't say anything negative about Urban. You can't make faces or comments or whatever that thing is you do when you disapprove. What thing? You know what thing. That subtle eyebrow thing. The way you pressed your lips together at dinner that night. I touched my eyebrow unconsciously. I don't... Promise me, Dad. This is my wedding day. It needs to be perfect. Perfect. For her, I could manage perfect. Or at least the appearance of it. I promise. No comments, no faces, no disapproval. I'll be the model father of the bride. Her exhale was audible. Good. The ceremony starts at 4. The Grand Pavilion in the Hamptons. I'll text you the address. Cocktails at 5. Dinner at 7. What should I wear? Navy suit is fine. Nothing too formal. The Whitakers already think... She stopped herself. Think what? Nothing, just... Navy suit is perfect. We both knew she'd been about to say the Whitakers already thought I couldn't afford anything formal. Probably true, from their perspective. Megan, about that night in the car. Dad, don't. Let's start fresh tomorrow, okay? Clean slate. Clean slate. As if 30 days of separation could be erased with good intentions, but I'd take whatever she offered. Clean slate, I agreed. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Dad. I'll see you tomorrow. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, hardly believing the conversation had actually happened. 30 days of agonizing silence ended with a 5-minute call that changed everything. My dinner sat cooling on the table, but I had no appetite. Instead, I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, opening the closet to examine my navy suit. The same one I'd worn to that disastrous dinner, but tomorrow it would serve a different purpose. Tomorrow, I'd walk my daughter down the aisle to marry someone I didn't trust. I'd smile and shake hands with people who'd spent an evening mocking my imaginary poverty. I'd pretend everything was perfect while watching my only child bind herself to a family that measured worth in dollars. But I'd be there. After 30 days of wondering if I'd lost her forever, I'd be there. Sometimes that had to be enough. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window at exactly 6:30, the same time I'd been waking for 30 years, but today felt different. Today I'd see my daughter again. The navy suit hung on my closet door, pressed and ready. I'd chosen it carefully the night before, my best, but not ostentatious. Conservative tie, polished black shoes, everything Megan had requested. Nothing the Whitakers could criticize as trying too hard. Breakfast required careful planning. My blood sugar monitor showed normal levels, but wedding stress could change that quickly. I took my morning insulin, ate steel-cut oats with measured precision, checked the glucose meter twice. Diabetic emergencies at my daughter's wedding weren't on today's agenda. The weather forecast promised perfection. 72 degrees, a light breeze, no chance of rain. The kind of day Megan had dreamed about since childhood, when she'd plan elaborate backyard weddings for her dolls. Coffee helped steady my nerves. I'd managed 3 hours of genuine sleep, the first peaceful rest in weeks. Hope was a powerful sedative. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed and examining my reflection. Modest, but respectable. Clean-shaven, careful grooming. A touch of cologne Megan had given me last Christmas. I looked like exactly what the Whitakers expected. A working man who'd done his best. You can do this, I told my reflection. No comments, no faces, no disapproval. Perfect behavior. The gift had required serious consideration. Too expensive would seem suspicious. Too cheap would embarrass Megan. I'd settled on a crystal vase from the local shop. Elegant enough for the occasion, modest enough to fit my supposed budget. $68 that felt appropriately thoughtful without raising questions. The shop owner had wrapped it beautifully, adding white ribbon and a small card. For the happy couple, I'd written. Wishing you joy, love, and understanding in your marriage. Understanding. If only they knew how much I understood about their character already. My phone showed several texts from acquaintances wishing Megan well. People who'd watched her grow up, who remembered her first steps in this very hallway. They had no idea today might be the last time I'd walk her down any aisle. The drive to the Hamptons would take 2 hours in Saturday traffic. Ceremony at 4, which meant leaving by noon to allow for parking and pre-wedding photographs. Time enough for one final check of everything. Insulin pen in jacket pocket. Emergency glucose tablets in pants pocket. Gift receipt in wallet, just in case. Phone fully charged. Everything a responsible father might need for his daughter's wedding day. I looked around my modest home one last time. If today went poorly, if I couldn't maintain the perfect behavior Megan required, this might be my last peaceful morning here. Tomorrow could bring another month of silence, or worse, but today also held possibility. Maybe Urban would surprise me. Maybe wedding joy would smooth the rough edges I'd seen at dinner. Maybe my daughter would find happiness despite my reservations. I picked up the wrapped gift and my car keys. Time to find out which version of today would unfold. The Toyota started reliably, as always. I adjusted the rear-view mirror, checked my appearance one final time, and backed out of the driveway. The Hamptons awaited, along with whatever this day would bring. The grand pavilion rose from manicured lawns like something from a magazine spread. Bentleys and Mercedes lined the circular drive, their chrome gleaming in afternoon sunlight. My Toyota looked like a lost delivery truck among thoroughbreds. A valet approached with barely concealed surprise. "Sir, are you here for the Whittaker-Harrington wedding?" "I'm the bride's father." His expression shifted to professional sympathy. "Of course, sir. Right this way." The venue's entrance hall sparkled with crystal chandeliers worth more than most houses. Floral arrangements towered like small trees, each bloom perfect, each stem precisely placed. The air smelled of expensive perfume and imported lilies. "Theodore!" Priscilla's voice carried across the marble foyer like a foghorn. "Everyone, this is Megan's father." 20 well-dressed guests turned to stare. Their eyes took inventory. Modest suit, department store shoes, gift that clearly wasn't from Tiffany. Polite smiles followed, the kind reserved for charity cases. "How wonderful that you could make it." Eldon materialized beside his wife. "I know the drive from... Where is it you live again?" "Hoboken." "Right. Quite a distance in that little car of yours." The photographer appeared, expensive equipment draped around his neck. "Family photos in 5 minutes?" "Immediate family only," Priscilla clarified quickly. "Theodore, perhaps you could wait over there?" Over there meant a corner beside the coat check, away from the important people. I watched the Whittakers pose with Megan, their designer clothing coordinated like a fashion shoot. Urban's groomsmen joined them, all Harvard ties and inherited confidence. A waiter offered champagne from a silver tray. "Krug Clos d'Ambonnet," he announced to the group. "Excellent vintage." "My goodness," one guest commented. "That's $300 a bottle." "Only the best for our son's wedding," Eldon declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Of course, not everyone appreciates fine champagne." He looked directly at me while saying it. The ceremony seating revealed another calculated insult. Front rows gleamed with Whittaker business associates and society friends. I was directed to row 7, behind elderly relatives and plus ones. The father of the bride, relegated to the cheap seats. "Beautiful ceremony location," I commented to the woman beside me. "Oh yes," she whispered back. 50,000 just for the venue rental. Thank goodness the Whittakers could afford it properly. I heard the bride's family." She trailed off, realizing her mistake. "Has very modest means," I finished for her. "Yes, I've heard that too." Urban's best man made rounds with expensive cigars. Cuban, he announced proudly, saved for special occasions. The humidor bypassed my row entirely. During cocktail hour, I caught a brief moment with Megan. She looked radiant in silk and pearls, happiness glowing beneath carefully applied makeup. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Thank you for coming, Dad. I know this isn't easy." "It's your day. That's all that matters." She squeezed my hand. Urban's family means well. They're just particular about their traditions. Particular. Like excluding the bride's father from family photos and seating him with strangers. "I'm fine," I assured her. "Go enjoy your reception." Dinner service began with theatrical flourish. Waiters emerged in synchronized formation, carrying plates that belonged in art galleries. 5 courses, each more elaborate than most restaurant entrees. The wine pairings alone probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. From my distant table, I watched the head table's animated conversation. Urban gestured expansively, telling stories that made his groomsmen laugh. Occasionally, he glanced toward my table with that same smirk I remembered from our first meeting. The dessert station appeared like a sugary cathedral. Wedding cake towered 5 tiers high, surrounded by chocolate sculptures and artisanal pastries. Guests gathered around, phones capturing every angle. I remained seated, observing from afar as always. The dessert presentation resembled a museum exhibition. 5-tier wedding cake dominated the center, surrounded by chocolate sculptures that belonged in art galleries rather than dinner plates. Guests circled the display with phones raised, capturing every ornate detail. I approached carefully, mindful of my position as perpetual outsider. The chocolate fountain gurgled expensively. Pastries arranged like jewelry sparkled with gold leaf. Everything designed to impress, nothing designed for someone with diabetes. A waiter noticed my hesitation. "Can I help you select something, sir?" "Do you have any sugar-free options? I'm diabetic." "Of course. We have fresh fruit, sugar-free chocolate mousse, and some lovely almond cookies made with stevia." Simple request, medical necessity. Nothing embarrassing about managing a health condition responsibly. "That sounds perfect. The fruit, please." Behind me, conversations continued. Wedding guests compared vacation homes and stock portfolios. Normal, wealthy people talk, the kind I could afford but chose not to engage in. "What's that about diabetic options?" Urban's voice cut through the background chatter like a saw through silk. He approached the dessert station with slightly unsteady steps, champagne clearly affecting his judgment. "I was just asking about sugar-free." "Sugar-free?" His laugh was too loud, drawing attention from nearby guests. "Let me guess. You can't afford the proper medical care either?" Conversations paused. Heads turned toward our exchange. The elegant atmosphere shifted, sensing drama. "I manage my condition just fine." "Of course you do. With free clinic visits and discount medication." Urban's voice carried across the room now, performing for an audience. "But hey, at least you made it to the wedding, right? Even if you can't afford proper dessert." "Urban," Megan's voice appeared behind us. "What's going on?" "Just helping your father understand the dessert options," he said, that familiar smirk spreading across his flushed features. "Apparently, beggars really can be choosers when it comes to wedding cake." Beggars, the word hung in the air like a curse. 50 guests had gone silent, sensing something ugly about to unfold. Waiters froze mid-service. Even the chocolate fountain seemed to quiet its gurgling. "That's enough," Megan said sharply. "Is it?" Urban stepped closer to me, alcohol making him bold, cruel, honest. "Because I'm tired of pretending this is okay. Tired of watching your deadbeat father embarrass our family." "He's not embarrassing anyone. Look at him." Urban gestured wildly at my modest suit, my careful posture, my simple presence among their luxury. "Look at this whole pathetic situation." Then his hands moved, fast, decisive, drunk but purposeful. My face hit the wedding cake with a sound like expensive fabric, tearing. Frosting filled my eyes, my nose, my mouth. 5 tiers of architectural sugar collapsed around me, vanilla and chocolate mixing with shock and humiliation. The room exploded into gas, shrieks, nervous laughter. Someone's phone camera flashed. A woman screamed. Chairs scraped against marble as people stood for better views. I straightened slowly, cake dripping from my hair, frosting sliding down my cheeks. The taste was actually quite good. Expensive vanilla with real butter, the kind of cake I could afford but would never order. Through the sugary mess coating my eyelashes, I saw faces. Shocked faces. Entertained faces. Disgusted faces. Megan's horrified face. "What have you done?" she whispered. Urban stood there, grinning, pleased with his performance, completely unaware that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. The crack of Megan's palm across Urban's face echoed through the stunned silence like a gunshot. Red bloomed across his cheek as he staggered backward, shock replacing his drunken smirk. "How dare you?" Her voice carried across the marble floor, reaching every corner of the reception hall. "How dare you lay a hand on my father?" I continued, wiping vanilla frosting from my eyes, tasting expensive buttercream while processing what had just happened. Wedding guests formed a loose circle around us, phones already recording what would become the social media scandal of the season. "Megan, calm down," Urban stammered, touching his reddening cheek. It was just what? Just assault? Just humiliating the man who raised me while you stood there laughing? A voice boomed from across the room, cutting through the chaos like authority itself. Enough? Charles Beaumont rose from his seat at table 12, his silver hair catching crystal chandelier. Light at 65, he commanded attention through presence rather than volume. The room quieted as he approached our disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles announced, his voice carrying the weight of boardroom authority, allow me to introduce Theodore Harrington. Some of you may recognize him as the founding investor in Technova Industries. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several guests straightened, suddenly paying attention. Theodore, Charles continued, his eyes finding mine across the frosting-covered chaos, is one of America's most successful private investors. His portfolio includes early stakes in companies that transform the digital landscape. Current net worth, he paused dramatically, well north of $1 billion. The room exploded into whispers. Heads turned toward each other, then back to me, then to Urban, whose face had drained of all color. That's Theodore Harrington? A woman near table 8 gasped. The Technova. Theodore Harrington? I knew he looked familiar, another guest added. His investment fund's been legendary in Silicon Valley for decades. Wait, someone else called out. The man who turned 5,000 into 4 million in 2 years? That Theodore Harrington? I straightened my frosting-stained jacket, meeting Charles's supportive gaze with a slight nod. Around us, recognition spread like wildfire through the assembled crowd. Business connections, investment stories, whispered confirmations of wealth that made the Whitakers' $3 million look like pocket change. Urban's face had progressed from red to white to green. Behind him, Eldon and Priscilla stood frozen, their expressions cycling through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. But he drives a Toyota, Priscilla whispered to no one in particular. He lives in Hoboken, Eldon added weakly. Charles smiled grimly. Exactly. Theodore understands something your family clearly doesn't. Money doesn't define character. Character defines how you treat people regardless of their apparent financial status. The circle of guests pressed closer, fascinated by the unfolding drama. Some looked embarrassed for having witnessed the assault. Others seemed thrilled by the social catastrophe they'd stumbled into. Urban opened his mouth several times without producing sound, like a fish pulled from expensive water. I finished wiping the last of the cake from my face and looked around the room at all the staring faces. People who'd ignored me an hour ago now watched with newfound respect and barely concealed mortification. The Whitaker family began moving toward me with panicked expressions, their social calculation skills finally catching up to reality. Theodore, please. Eldon reached me first, his business instincts overriding social paralysis. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. I continued brushing cake crumbs from my sleeves, maintaining the same quiet dignity I'd shown all evening. Around us, wedding guests had formed an amphitheater of fascinated spectators. Misunderstanding? I looked at Eldon calmly. Your son just physically assaulted me in front of 200 witnesses. Which part did I misunderstand? Urban stumbled forward, alcohol and panic making him clumsy. Mr. Harrington, sir, I didn't know. I mean, if I'd realized... Realized what? That I might be wealthy? I shook my head slowly. So assault is acceptable if the victim is poor? No, that's not... I didn't mean... Urban's words tangled around his tongue. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Priscilla appeared at her son's shoulder, damage control instincts engaged. Theodore, surely we can put this unfortunate incident behind us. Family disagreements happen at weddings. Emotions run high. Family disagreements, I repeated her words like they were foreign language. Is that what you call your month of systematic humiliation? Your deliberate exclusion from photographs? Your son's physical violence? We apologize, Eldon said quickly, his tone shifting into business negotiation mode. Completely. Unreservedly. Let's start fresh, shall we? Clean slate. The same words Megan had used during our reconciliation call. But these words carried no love, only calculation. Start fresh, I mused aloud. Now that you know I have money. Your financial status has nothing to do with this, Priscilla protested, her voice pitched too high. Charles Beaumont laughed harshly from nearby. Madame, your treatment of Theodore had everything to do with money. You spent 2 months mocking a man you believed was poor. Now you want friendship because he's rich. That's not true, Urban said desperately. I would have treated him the same either way. Really? I asked quietly. The same way you treated the waiters tonight? The valet who parked your car? The housekeeping staff? Urban's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Your character, I continued, was revealed perfectly tonight. Not by what you did to a poor man, but by how you acted when you thought consequences didn't matter. Please, Eldon tried again. Business aside, personal aside, you're going to be family. We need to work together. Family? The word tasted bitter. I watched you teach your son that money determines human worth, that poverty justifies cruelty, that wealth excuses anything. I brushed a final piece of frosting from my shirt collar. You want to start fresh? Here's my fresh start. I'm leaving. You can't just walk away, Priscilla said, desperation creeping into her voice. Think about Megan. Think about the business opportunities. Think about what we could accomplish together. Business opportunities. Even now, facing social catastrophe, they calculated profit margins. I'm thinking about Megan, I said quietly. I'm thinking she deserves better than a family that measures love in dollars. Urban grabbed my arm as I turned toward the exit. Wait, I can change. I can be better. I looked down at his hand gripping my sleeve, then back to his face. You're 30 years old. This is who you are. The crowd parted as I walked toward the doors, whispers following in my wake. Behind me, the Whitakers' voices rose in increasingly frantic appeals, but their words meant nothing now. They'd shown me exactly who they were when they thought it didn't matter. Evening air washed over me like absolution as I stepped outside the grand pavilion. Behind me, muffled voices continued the social catastrophe I'd left behind. Ahead, the parking lot stretched toward my modest Toyota, sanctuary among the abandoned luxury vehicles. Footsteps pounded on marble, then concrete. Someone running. Dad, wait! I turned to see Megan lifting her wedding dress, designer silk trailing as she chased me across the asphalt. Her carefully styled hair had loosened, makeup streaked from tears I hadn't seen her shed. Sweetheart, you should go back inside. It's your wedding. No. She stopped in front of me, breathing hard. It's not. Not anymore. We stood there in the golden hour light, father and daughter separated by months of hurt and misunderstanding. Her wedding dress cost more than most cars. My suit was stained with cake that probably cost more than most dinners. I'm so sorry, she whispered. You were right. About everything. About Urban, about his family, about what money does to people. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. Why didn't you? I looked toward the ocean visible beyond the pavilion's manicured gardens, because I wanted you to choose someone who loved you for who you are, not what I have. I wanted your relationships to be genuine. Like ours? The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure we could cross. Our relationship is genuine, I said finally. It survived wealth, poverty, conflict, separation. It survived tonight. Megan stepped closer, her hand finding mine. I spent 2 months angry at you for not trusting my judgment, but you knew. You saw what I couldn't see. I saw what I was afraid to see. Sometimes being right doesn't feel like victory. She laughed, but it came out more like a sob. I just left my own wedding reception to chase my father across a parking lot, in a $20,000 dress. 20,000? I raised an eyebrow. For that much, it should have come with better running shoes. Her laugh was real this time. Take me home, Dad. What about your reception, your guests? What about them? Let Urban explain to his family's friends why the bride disappeared. Let them figure out their own social disaster. I looked at my daughter in her expensive wedding dress, standing beside my 10-year-old Toyota Camry. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. I opened the passenger door for her, and she gathered $20,000 worth of silk into the modest interior. As I walked around to the driver's side, I saw guests beginning to emerge from the pavilion, probably wondering where the bride had gone. Where to? I asked, starting the engine. Home, she said simply. Your home. our home. The drive back to Hoboken took us through familiar territory, past the places where I'd raised her, where we'd built a life based on values rather than valuations. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, making even the modest neighborhoods look magical. I understand now, Megan said as we crossed the bridge toward home. Why you live the way you do. Why you never flaunted the money. Money is a tool, I said, not an identity, not a measure of worth, just a tool for building the life you actually want. What life do you want? I pulled into my driveway, looking at the simple house where I'd raised my daughter to be strong, independent, and kind. This one. Exactly this one. We sat in the car for a moment, watching the sun set over our neighborhood. Simple houses, modest lawns, genuine relationships built on character rather than capital. Come on, I said finally. Let's go inside. I'll make coffee and we can figure out what comes next. Together we walked toward the front door of the little house that had always been rich in everything that mattered. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.